Okay, so we'll start 4 lines from the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, towards the end of the line. Tana Rabbanan, Banim V'loi Banais. We're talking about Mitzri and Amayni entering the congregation of Hashem. So the Brisa tells us, Tana Rabbanan, Banim V'loi Banais, sons and not daughters. So the prohibition is only applies to sons and not daughters. Divrei Reb Shimon. These are the words of Reb Shimon. Amar Reb Yehuda, similar to what we said in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon's opinion in the Mishnah is that they are allowed to, the women are allowed to enter the Kahal Hashem. Amar Reb Yehuda, Reb Yehuda says, Harehu Oimer, but it says in the pasuk, Banim asher yivoldu lahem dar shlishi, sons or children that are born to the third generation. In the third generation, they can enter the Kahal Hashem, and this pasuk we're going to be using a lot today. Banam asher yivoldu lahem dar shlishi yavai lahem b'Kahal Hashem. They can come into the congregation of Hashem. Hakasav tolan beleda. By the fact that the Torah wrote the word yivoldu, you see that the Torah connected it to those who give birth, which is the women. So you can't exclude the women, says Rabbi Yehuda. Fine, so that's the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Ilav de Amar Rabbi Yehuda hakasuv Talon Beleda, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said this statement that Hakasav Talon Beleda, that the Torah connected them with those who give birth, which is the women, not only the men, he wouldn't have been able to find his hands and feet in the Beis Medrash. That's what it literally means. In other words, he wouldn't have had an answer for the following question, which we would have had, and that is, Kivan de Omar Mar says, Kahal Gerim Ikri Kol. Kahal Gerim is called Kahal. Ikri Kahal is considered to be Kahal Hashem. In other words, there's a dispute whether or not Gerim are considered Kahal Hashem. A convert to Judaism, so are they considered Kahal Hashem? When somebody is prohibited from a relationship with Kahal Hashem, for example, a Mitzri in the first 3 generations, until the 3rd generation, is not allowed to marry Asur Lavai B'Kahal Hashem. Not allowed to marry a Jewish woman, or vice versa. A Jewish man can't marry a Mitzri woman, a Mitzris, till the 3rd generation, right? So, or unless you hold like a Shimon. But so when you say Asur Lavai B'Kahal Hashem can't join the Jewish congregation, the congregation of Hashem, does that include a Giyar as a convert? So there's a machlokes. According to one opinion, Gerim are their own Kahal. It's their own congregation. Somebody who's forbidden from joining the Kahal Hashem is still permitted to be with a Ger or Geyeris. The other opinion is no. There is an opinion. We're quoting here the Amar Mar Kahal Gerim Ikri Kal. Gerim converts are also considered Kahal Hashem, and if somebody's forbidden from marrying into the congregation of Hashem, they'd be forbidden from marrying a Ger or Geyeris as well. So according to the opinion which says Kahal Gerim Ikri Kahal, that Gerim converts are Kahal Hashem, Sheni b'mayitar, top line in Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, Mitzri Sheni b'mayitar. A 2nd generation Mitzri, how are they going to produce a Tahar, a 3rd generation, which is permissible to enter the Kahal Hashem? It's not possible. Take a Mitzri man, and who's he going to marry to produce the next generation Mitzri?
A mamzer wouldn't be
no.
part of Kahal Hashem.
Yeah, no. So why should a ger be able to marry a mamzer? If a ger Mitzri marries a mamzer, they're going to produce a mamzer. We'd have that later also, that any one of the 2 parents that are a mamzer, the child is a mamzer. So that won't work. If he marries a mitzris, which normally is the case, generation number 1 marries a mitzris, and they produce generation number 2, and the 3rd generation can now marry into Kahal Hashem.
Rabbi Akiva permitted 2nd generation.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. We'll see that soon with 2nd generation. But the question over here is that a Mitzri Sheni will have nobody to marry to have a Mitzri Shlishi. If the woman, the Mitzris, Giyayres, is now Kahal Hashem, so the Mitzri would be usher to marry this Mitzris, who's Kahal Hashem. Because the Isser of Kahal Hashem would apply to him, apply to her, and he won't be able to marry her. Therefore, it wouldn't be possible. But the way Rabbi Yehuda is saying here that Talan Akasa Beleda, that it applies to women as well, so they're usher, right? If the Isser of Mitzri does not apply to women, and the convert is already Kahal right away, so the Mitzri wouldn't have anybody to marry. in order to produce another generation. So now that Rabbi Yehuda says Hakasav Tolan Beleda, it applies to women as well. Very nice. The Mitzri can marry the Mitzris. There's no problem, and you can have 3 generations, and then they can enter Kahal Hashem. Rav Shimon holds it doesn't apply to women. So according to Rav Shimon,
so the Mitzri, how does he marry the second generation?
According to Rav Shimon, you probably have a bigger problem. Yeah.
Who does he marry? The Mitzri Rishon, he can't marry the Gioris, so he can marry a Mitzri who's not a Gioris, I guess, because.
Well, then it's going to produce
after him.
That's right, because it doesn't apply to her.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, or he can marry a different kind of Gioris, maybe. Like he can marry or according to Rav Shimon, maybe Kahal Gerim is not Kahal Hashem. I'm not sure. They probably explain different answers on according to Rav Shimon, but this is according to Rabbi Yehuda. So now the Gemara continues now on the top of Ayin Ches and says, perhaps we have another answer. Maybe you don't need Rabbi Yehuda's statement that Asher Yivoldu. Dilma the Avar the Nasiv is talking about if the Mitzri went ahead and married her even though he wasn't allowed to. Avar, he did an Aveira and he married her. So the Gemara answers De'i loy kasav kra. The Torah doesn't tell us things of De'i, of if. Like if an uncommon thing happens, so then this is the halacha. The Torah doesn't tell us De'i, like what ifs. So the Gemara asks on that, Hare Mamzer. De'i, it's De'i. The whole concept of mamzer is if somebody went along and had a forbidden relationship with a woman who he wasn't allowed to be with, the child is a mamzer. But that whole concept is what if, right? If. There's no such thing as a natural mamzer. It's only if. And still the Torah wrote it. V'kas ve'kra. The Gemara answers the isura kasav, the hetera like kasav. When what if a de'i of isura, then the Torah wrote it, but if of hetera, the Torah didn't write. The reason why the Torah had to write a de'i of isura is to tell us, to warn us that this person is usher, so we have to know about it. But it's not going to create a case in the Torah of de'i of if just for heter. So the Gemara asks on that. Hare machzer grushasei. We have the halacha of machzer grushasei. If somebody divorces his wife, and then that wife goes ahead and marries somebody else, and then subsequently she gets divorced or widowed from him, he is not allowed to remarry her. Right? That's the Isser of Machzer Grushasei. The Torah tells us. However, if he went ahead and married her anyways, the children are kosher. The kosher even in the kahuna.
Yeah. Does he have to divorce her after that?
Probably. Because it's Isser, as long as he keeps her, it's Isser. I think we had a Gemara earlier, yeah. The E, so there it's the E, it's what if case, if he took her back, if, and it's lehetera, because it's coming to teach us, it teaches us that there's a heter to the children, that they're mutter. The kasvei, and the Torah still wrote it. So, why are you telling me that the Torah doesn't write de'is if it's leheter? The Gemara answers, Hasa mishum ikr isurahu the kasvei. Really, the Torah wrote that to tell us the isur of machzer grushasei. By the way, we learn out a side point that the children are mutter, but the Torah didn't create a whole scenario of de'i for heter. It was really for the isur of machzer grushasei. Says the Gemara Vayter, Tana Rabbanan. Im nemar banim, lama nemar doirais. So again, we'll go back to this pasuk which we're going to be discussing. We'll take it apart here. Banim asher yivoldu, pasuk in Devarim Chav Gimel, it says, Banim asher yivoldu lahem dar shlishi. Sons or children which are born to the third generation, or in the third generation, Yavai lahem mikahal Hashem, referring to the Mitzri, the Egyptian converts, that at the third generation they can now join the congregation of Hashem. Why does the pasuk need to say the word banim and doirais? So it's Dr. Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. Im nemar banim, lama nemar doirais. Im nemar doirais, it says generations, lama nemar banim. Why does it have to say sons? Im nemar banim, v'loy nemar doirais. The Gemara answers, if it would have just said sons and not generations, so you see, Aymar would have said, ben rishon v'sheni aser shlishi mutter. I would have said if somebody has an Egyptian convert of the first generation that has 3 sons, I would have thought that son number 1 and number 2 are aser, but his third son in that same generation is mutter to enter the Kahal Hashem. That's what I would have thought if it would have just said banim. Therefore it says also the word doiris, generations. The im nemar doiris, if it would have just said generations, v'loy nemar banim, I wouldn't have said sons. We would have thought that maybe it's only the first 3 generations, the first 2 generations are Asr, and the third generation from Sinai, from Har Sinai, of those who are standing by Har Sinai, it only applies to them. But everybody after that third generation is mutter. The third generation included. Therefore it says banim also to teach us that every Mitzri until the third generation, even far removed from Har Sinai, is mutter. it has the Isser, and then it becomes mutter in the third generation. Then the pasuk says lohem, right? It says banim asher yivoldu lohem, to them, children that are born to them. What is lohem teaching us? Mehem minei. You start counting from them. So in other words, if you have a Mitzri who converts, he's generation number 1. His son is generation number 2, and his grandson, his son's son, is already the third generation, which is permitted to marry into the congregation of Hashem, can marry a Jewish woman. Then it says in the pasuk again the word lohem. It says, "Banam asher yivoldu lohem dor shlishi yavoi lohem b'kahal Hashem." Why does it say again lohem? Halech achar psulan. You go after the one that's puzzle. In other words, if the father or mother is puzzle, if a Mitzri marries a Jewish woman, so the child takes on the status of Mitzri. If a kosher, a regular Jew marries a Mitzris, again the child takes on the status of Mitzri. He has to wait till 3 generations. But you always go after the one that's puzzle. Okay. But then the Gemara says, "V'itzrich lemichtav lohem, v'itzrich lemichtav asher yivoldu." The pasuk tells us lohem, which we learn. We're saying the first lohem tells us that you start counting from that first generation. He's already counted as generation number 1, and then it says asher yivoldu, which might indicate that only which is born. So the first Mitzri, the one who converts, is not considered generation number 1. Only you have to have 3 generations that are born. Asher yivoldu. The first one that's born is 1, 2, 3. So only his great grandson is mutter lovei b'kahal Hashem, but not his grandson. It seems to be contradictory implications in this pasuk. So the Gemara explains the ikas of Rachmana asher yivoldu. If the Torah would have just written asher yivoldu, which are born, I would have thought mi b'neihem minei. You start counting from the son, so that means only the great grandson is mutter, 4th generation. Because of Rachmana lohem, that's why the Torah wrote lohem to tell us that you start counting from him. He's the 1st generation, and his grandson is already the 3rd. Because of Rachmana lohem, so let the Torah just write lohem, and we would know that. The Gemara explains, I need to write the word Yivoldu, Havamina Mitzris, because otherwise Havamina would have thought Mitzris Me'uberes, an Egyptian woman who is pregnant, and is Gaira that becomes a convert. He Ubenochad. I might have thought that her and her son are both 1 generation, and the 2nd generation only starts from her grandson. Because she converted this child at conception, she was not a convert. She only converted while she was already pregnant. So the Torah tells Asher Yivol Kasem Rachman Asher Yivoldu. The birth itself creates the 2nd generation, even though at the time of conception she was an Egyptian. The Itzrich Lemichtav.
So beloved Kedusha, we still.
That's correct.
Normally, they'd say a woman's muberes and converts. So the vlad is a vlad. Geras, I think.
Yes, I'm not sure all the halachic, the ramifications of Hayrasa B'Kedusha and Ledasa Hayrasa Shalai B'Kedusha. There's different. The Gemaras talk about it. I don't remember all the details of it, but yeah, there are differences. But we're saying over here, with regard to generations of Mitzri, Yivoldu, because the Torah tells us Yivoldu, the fact that another one is born, that's enough to create a 2nd generation. V'itzrich lemichtav lohem. It has to say lohem hacha over here by us by Mitzri. V'itzrich lemichtav loy, and it also has to write loy, the word loy by mamzer, gabe mamzer. Right, the pasuk by mamzer says lo yavoy mamzer b'kahal Hashem. Gam dor asiri, even the 10th generation lo yavoy loy b'kahal Hashem. So it seems that it's telling us the same thing that lohem is telling us here, that even if one of the parents are a psul of Mitzri or Daimi, and the child takes on that status, so too by mamzer, even if just one of the parents, if a mamzer went ahead and married a Yisraelis, the child is also a mamzer. So that's what the word loy is telling us over there. It seems both places have a word that seems to be telling us the same thing. So why do we need both? The Gemara explains. So v'itzrich lemichtav lohem hacha. You have to say lohem here. V'itzrich lemichtav loy gabi mamzer. The ikas of rachmana hacha. If it were just written over here, the word lohem mishum dibba b'tipa psula. I would have thought, why is he puzzled over here? Because the child came from a tipa psula, a drop of zera from a puzzle person, the Mitzri. Even if he's a convert, so even the 1st and 2nd generation, he's still a puzzle person. He's still puzzle. So he was produced from a zera of psul. Aval mamzer, the bo mitipa kshera, but mamzer, how's a mamzer produced? A mamzer produced when a regular Jewish person marries a Jewish woman that's usher to him, right? So, but the zera, the tipa, it came from tipa kshera. So I may have said a maloi. it doesn't apply. The Isra doesn't go on to the child if it's only one parent. The Ikas of Rachmana Gabi Mamzer. So, and if it would have just said by Mamzer the word loy, and it wouldn't have said lohem over here, I would have thought Mishum de ein roy lavi b'kal la'olam. Since Mamzer is much more strict, and the pasuk says it's never allowed to come into Kal Hashem Asur la'olam. The same thing wouldn't apply over here by Mitzvi. Aval hacha emaloi. In other words, if only one parent was a mitzvah, it wouldn't apply. I would have thought Mamzer is much more strict because Asur la'olam. It's Asur forever. Aval hacha emaloi. I would have said no if not for the word lahem. Therefore, tzvicha I need to write lahem and loy. Okay, the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri Sheni, a Mitzri who converted in the second generation. So his father converted, and now this son is still a Mitzri. It's the second generation. Shenasa Mitzris Rishayna, that got married to a Mitzris, an Egyptian woman who converted. She herself converted, so she's the first generation. What's the status of the son? B'no Shlishi. The Gemara tells us in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the son is a third generation. Havoi is Alma. We see Kasavar Basar Didei Shadinan. We go by the father. The father. We go after the father for generations. So it's considered a third generation. Masiv Rabbi Yosef challenges this from a brisa. It says Rabbi Tarfon Oimer Yechalin Mamzerin Li Taher. Mamzerin have a way out. A mamzer, even though the Torah says is Asur Love B'Kal Hashem La'olam, he's not allowed to marry a Jew ever, or Jewess ever, right? But there's a way out. How so? Rabbi Tarfon says, Ketzad Mamzer Nasa Shifcha. If a mamzer gets married to a maidservant, like a Shifcha Kananis, Havlad Eved. The halacha is, the Torah says that the vlad is the eved. Shechru, and then if you free the eved, this woman and her child, nimtza ben chayrin. The child is now ben chayrin, full-fledged Jew. Alma basar didosh adinan. So you see from this brisa that it goes by her, not him, right? Even though the father was a mamzer. And the Gemara answers, Shani Hasam, it's different over there. Why? Even though normally you would say it goes by the father, over here it's different. The Amarkra, the pasuk says, Ha'isha viladeha tiya ladoineha. The woman and her offspring and her child, tiya ladoineha, are to the master. The Torah tells us a special thing by Eved, that Shifcha and her Vlad and her children belong to the Eved, so it's specific to that scenario, but not all over. Everywhere else, it goes by the father. Okay, so that answers Rav Yosef's question. Masif Rava asks a question on this, that it goes by the father. Rabbi Yehuda says, Minyamin, this person's name was Minyamin, Ger Mitzri Haya. He was an Egyptian convert. Li Chaver, he was a friend to me, he was a friend of mine. Mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva, and he was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. But Amar, and he said, Ani Mitzri Rishon, I'm a first generation Mitzri convert. Benasasi Mitzris Rishayna, and I married a first generation Mitzris, Egyptian woman who converted. Asi Livani Mitzris Shniya. Now my son will marry a second generation Egyptian convert woman. Kadeshi Hey Ben Beni Roy Lavi B'Kal Hashem. In order that my son will be worthy of entering the congregation of Hashem. So it's great. But the Gemara says, so we see from here, if you say it goes by the father, his son could have also married a first generation convert Egyptian woman. Why does Minyamin say that since he married a first generation, his son has to marry a second generation? His son can also marry a first generation Mitzvahs, and their son will be a third generation, because it goes by the father, not by the mother. The Gemara answers, you're right. When Rabbi Yochanan said to the one who said over this teaching that you shouldn't teach it to say second generation, you should say rather first generation. It doesn't mean it to be specific second generation. When Binyamin said second, it really should be taught as first generation. Okay, so that explains the last few lines we were explaining Rabbi Bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that we go by the father for the generations. Now we have from Rabbi Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we go by the mother for the generations. So the Gemara continues. It says, Ki asa Rabbi Dimi, and Rabbi Dimi came, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri Sheni, a second generation Mitzri, Egyptian, Shanasa Mitzris Rishayna, that married a first, but no Sheni, the son is only a second generation, Havoi. You see that it goes by the first. You see that it goes by the mother. Amar le Abaye. So Abaye asked on this. So the Gemara assumes that we're using the concept that it goes by the mother because there's a concept of uber yarech imay. And uber yarech imay, we have it by carbon, we have it by animals, we have it by people also. Uber yarech imay means, according to the opinion of uber yarech imay, that the fetus inside the mother is considered like another part of the mother's body, just like an organ of the mother's body. It doesn't have its own entity. So, if we're assuming that if we say that the child takes on the generational status of the mother, it's because of this concept of Ubi Yerech Imai. So on this, Aryai is challenging this. Amar le Aryai says, Elohada Amar Rabbi Yochanan, you're saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it goes by the mother. The generations go by the mother. But Rabbi Yochanan himself said, in a different place, Hifrish chatos meuberes, if somebody sets aside a carbon chatos, an animal for a carbon chatos, which is pregnant, the yolda, and it gives birth, ratza mischaper ba, ratza mischaper bivlada. If you want, you can have the kapara, you can bring as your carbon chatos her, the original carbon, or ratza mischaper bivlada with the child that was born. Either one is good. Now, how do we understand this? If you say, it will be good if you say, Uber lav yerech imai. Uber is not considered another, like the thigh of the mother, another part of the piece of the mother. In other words, it has its own entity. And it's just like you set aside two karbanos, la'achrayas, one to guarantee the other. Why would somebody set aside two karbanos for his carbon chatas? Just in case something happens to the other. It's achrayas, guaranteed. But Rabbi says on this, Hifrish Shtei Chatois, the halacha is, if Hifrish Shtei Chatois la'achrayas, if somebody sets aside two karbanas for his carbon chatas, one to guarantee the other, mischaper ba'achas mehen v'ashniya tira. One of them you use as your kapara, and the second one you just have to let it graze until it gets a mum. Okay. Once it gets its mum, so you could sell it off. Yeah, because it's no longer fit for the mizbeach. So this fits very well if we say Uber lav yarech imai. So again, it's Rabbi Yochanan speaking, and Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us. It comes out from the words of Rabbi Yochanan that Uber lav yarech imai, right? So, that wouldn't fit with what we're saying, that the child takes on the generation, like by mitzvah we're saying that it takes on the generation of the mother, if we're saying that Uber lav yerech imai. If you're going to say that Uber is yerech imai, who havi lei vlad chatas. Back to the case of chatas, it would be a vlad chatas, and the halacha of vlad chatas uvlad chatas lemisa azil. The halacha is that a vlad chatas, the child of a chatas, if you set aside a chatas and then it gives birth, it's lemisa. That child of vlad chatas is lemisa. So ishtik. So he was quiet. Rav Dimi was quiet. He didn't have the answer. Amar lei. That means if the chatas you shechted a carbon chatas and it had a vlad inside, so it goes lemisa. You kill it. You can't do anything with it. Yeah. Right. What?
5 chatos are one is
Right. Okay, so Ishtik, he was quiet. Amarle, Abaya, who asked the question himself, he said this answer. Dilma, perhaps Shani Hasam, it's different over here, or it's different over there. The Chsev Asher Yivoldu. Since it says the word Asher Yivoldu, I'm sorry, this is talking about by Mitzvi, back to us, right? So maybe it's different. Even though, so the Gemara first said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it goes by the mother. Then we asked, we see that Rabbi Yochanan himself, it can't be Uber Yerech Imai by the case of Chatas, it has to be Uber Lav Yerech Imai. So now Abai is suggesting the answer is the difference, even though normally you would say it goes by the mother. But still here, it's Uber Lav Yerech Imai. Even though it's Uber Lav Yerech Imai, still it's different by mitzvah because it says Asher Yivoldu. Hakasav Talu B'Leida. The Torah connected it to the one who gives birth, which is the mother. So therefore, that's why specifically by mitzvah, Rabbi Yochanan would say, mitzvah and the pasuk that says Dar Shlishi, Banu Asher Yivoldu Lahem Dar Shlishi Yav Lahem B'Kahal Hashem. Since it says Yivoldu, the Torah is totally B'Leida. That's why it goes by the mother. But normally it wouldn't. You would not say Uber Yerech Imai. Amar lei. So Rabbi Dimi responded to Abai. He says Karkafna. Rashi says Karkafna means Chacham, right? Karkafna Adam Chashav. Adam Chashav literally means like a skull, but Adam Chashav because Chazite l'Reishech Beini Amudi. I saw your head between the poles, meaning to say I saw you Now I remember that I saw you in the study hall in the base medrash when Rabbi Yochanan said over this. He was the one who said this explanation. Ki Amar Rabbi Yochanan lahashmaita. When Rabbi Yochanan said over this sugya, he explained it like this. You're just saying over now what you heard from him. Now I remember that this is the right pshat. So now the Gemara analyzes this, and the Gemara says, "Time of the kasiv, the ksiv asher yevoldu." Only because it says asher yevoldu, that's why we go by the mother. But normally, haba alma basar avu ashadinan. So it seems to imply that everywhere else I would go by the father. Elohada Amar Rava. What are we going to do with this statement from Rava, which says Nachris me'uberish in Iskaira, and Nachris, a guy, woman who is pregnant that becomes a giyires. So the process of becoming a convert is one of the things she has to go to the mikveh. And if she's pregnant while she goes to the mikveh, and then the child is born after she's ready a giyarish, the child does not need to go to the mikveh again. Why doesn't it need its own tefillah? Right? If you're telling me that uber lav yerech imoi, according to Rabbi Yochanan, why, if it's its own entity, why wouldn't it need to go to the mikvah on its own? It's its own entity. If you're going to say it's because of Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Davar Torah Ruba Yomak B'Alav Chaytzeitz. The halacha by tefillah, by going to the mikvah, is you cannot have a chatzitza, anything separating between your skin and the water. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, if you have a chatzitza, what is considered to be a chatzitza which renders the tefillah invalid? That is rubai umakbet. It has to cover most of your body, and it has to be of a substance, something which is on your skin that you don't want. Makbet, something that bothers you. You don't want it there. Okay, so, but rubai she'ene makbet alav, something most of your body, and you're not makbet on it. It's not a chatzitza. So this this fetus inside the mother, is very happy to be there, right? It doesn't mind the separation of the mother between it and the water. So therefore, it's not a chatzitza. If you say that, you can't say that, says the Gemara, because Rav Kahana says, it only applies that it's not a chatzitza when it's most of the body. Aval kulai, if it's entire body, then chatzitz, then it is a chatzitza. So the Gemara says, even though Rav Kahana says this, Shani Uber is different. The Hainu Ravise, because that's its way. It grows. It belongs there. It's in its place. It's supposed to be there. It's not like you don't look at it as something is in the way of the Uber. Okay. Now, Ki Asa Ravino came to Bavel Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ba'ubayis Halech Achar Hazachar. By nations, like to decide what nation this child is, it goes by the father. It goes by the male. The Skairu, if the parents convert to Judaism, Halech achar pagum shebeshnehem. You go by the one who's more pagum, who has like a more blemished. In other words, like a worse off status. The child takes on that one. The Gemara is going to explain both of these statements in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. But by nations we go by the male, by the father, like we learned in the Brisa. How do we know that if somebody from one of the generations, in other words, anywhere in the world, Shabal a Knanis, that had a relationship with a Knanis, which is one of the 7 nations, right? And the halacha is, the Torah tells us in Devarim that Lo Yisachai Yakol Neshama, one of the Zayin Amimim, and from the 7 nations which were in Eretz Yisrael, Lo Yisachai, we were commanded to kill them out. They're not allowed to live. You're not allowed to even have them as an Eved. So if a regular goy, not one of the 7 nations, marries a woman who is from the 7 nations, v'hoylid ben, and they produce a child, she'ata rashai l'knoisei be'eved. How do you know that this child you're allowed to purchase as an eved? And so that means it would take on the status of its father for the nation, not the mother. Shenemer, because like it says in the pasuk, v'gam mibnei hatoishavim hagorim imachem mehem tiknu. From those who are living there, Taishavim, they're the Taishav, like they're living in your city, in your place. Hagorim imachem, who live together with you, mehem tiknu, you can buy from them. Right? So, in other words, with these people that are living with you in Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to purchase Eved from them. But by the fact that the Torah said they called them Toishavim, that means they're not really from Eretz Yisrael. They came from a different land. Like their father was the Zion Amimim that we're talking about that are Usser come from Eretz Yisrael. They were in Eretz Yisrael at the time, right? But the father came from a different land. He moved to Eretz Yisrael, so it's just considered to be a Taishav of Eretz Yisrael, not considered to be from Eretz Yisrael. I would think also maybe a male of the Zion Amimim, a man from the 7 nations that marries a woman from any other nation, that child also you can purchase as an Eved. I would think that was born in your land. That's what the pasuk says. The first pasuk that we were reading, "V'gam b'pnei hatoshavim hagar mimachem mehem tiknu umimishpachtam asher imachem asher holidu ba'artzachem," which were born in your land. Mehem tiknu. Ba'artzachem v'hayu lachem lachuz. Okay, right? It will be your land. So tamalem asher holidu ba'artzachem. That teaches us. They're called b'nei hatoshavim, but they're min hanoiladim ba'artzachem. They came. They were born in your land. In other words, their father was not from the Canaanim, one of the Zion, in one of the 7 nations. But v'loy min hagarim ba'artzachem. Not from. You can't take a child who came from a father who lived, who were garim ba'artzachem, lived in your land. There's a difference between a Taishavim and Garim be'artzachem. What we're trying to say over here is the father, Rashi explains that it's normal for a man to travel away from his homeland and go to where his wife is from. But the mother, the woman, is usually stays put where she's from. So if this child is born in Eretz Yisrael, but is a Taishav, means his father came from outside of Eretz Yisrael. So that's why he's kosher. But if the father came from Eretz Yisrael, he's garim be'artzachem, then that's where he's aser. Okay. Now says the Gemara Vayter. Nisgairu halech achar pagam. The second thing that we said was over here that we need an explanation from Rabbi Yochanan. Nisgairu, if they convert, halech achar pagam shebeshneim. You go after the more blemished, the one with the worst status. B'mai, what's it talking about? If you say it's talking about an Egyptian that married an Amoinis, my pogum shebeshneim ispa. What pogum shebeshneim? What do you mean the one who's more blemished? She doesn't have anything. Amoini v'lo Amoinis. Right? We darshan that it only applies to men, not women by Amoini. So Ella, what's it talking about? It's talking about Amoini shenasa mitzris. It's talking about by an Amoini that married a Egyptian woman. If it's an Amoini, if it's a Zachar, if it's a boy that's born, so then it goes by the Amoini, because it's a Amoini man that married a mitzvah. So the Amoini, so it goes by his status, which is worse, which is Asher La'ila, right? And in the Keva, if it's a girl that's born, so she would be, if it would just go Basar Amoini, the father, she would be mutter, because Amoini v'lo Amoinis. So therefore she takes on the status of the mother, which is mitzvah, which is Asr till 3rd generation. Okay. So the Mishnah. The Mishnah says 2 more kind of people that are Asr Lava B'Kal Hashem. Continuing on the same theme. Mamzerin v'Nesinin. Mamzer, we know what a mamzer is. It's somebody who came out of a forbidden relationship, and a nasin is the Gevainim. Gevainim are they converted at the time of Yeshua deceitfully, and they were Asr Lavei B'Kal Hashem from the time of David HaMelech, like we'll see in the Gemara soon. The Mishnah says the Isuran Isur Olam, they're Asr forever. Echad Zecharim ve'Echad Nekevos, both male and female. So it's across the board. This Isur. Omer Rish Lakish says, Mamzeres la'achar asara daires muteres. And Mamzeres, after 10 generations, so not like the Mishnah, after 10 generations, and Mamzeres is mutter lavei b'kal Hashem, says Rish Lakish. How do we know this? Yalif asiri me amayni umayavi. We learn out of Gzeira Shava from Aman Umayav. Malal in the Kevas Mutaris, Afkan in the Kevas Mutaris. Just like by Aman Umayav, I'll explain in a second. Aman Umayav, the women, the females were permitted, Lava B'Kal Hashem. Also these, the Mamzeres, after 10 generations, is Mutter Lava B'Kal Hashem. So now, why do we have Gzeira Shav over here? The Torah tells us by Mamzer, like we quoted the pasuk before. Let's see, we have it over here again. Lo Yavai Mamzer B'Kahal Hashem. Gam dor asiri lo yavoy loy b'kahal Hashem. Also, the 10th generation should not enter the congregation of Hashem. That's all it says by Mamzer. By Amoin Umoyav, it says lo yavoy Amoini Umoyavi b'kahal Hashem. Gam dor asiri lo yavoy lohem b'kahal Hashem. Ad olam. It adds 2 words to the pasuk. Ad olam, forever. So it doesn't say forever by the Mamzer. So how do we know it's forever? We need Gzeira Shava. So we borrow what we don't have, the information that the Torah does not give us by Mamzer, we get it from Amun Umoyav. So Rish Lakish is saying that we, just like Amun Umoyav, their women are mutter, Lavi B'Kahal Hashem, so too the Mamzeres, after 10 generations, is also going to be mutter. So the Gemara is going to explain. The Gemara first asks, Ima ala halon miyad, afkan miyad. By Amun Umoyav, the women are allowed to enter the Kahal Hashem right away. Even the first generation. So why not Mamzeres also? If you're learning from Gzeira Shava from Mamzeres from Amun Umoyav, you should learn that they're mutter to love B'Kahal Hashem right away. Why after 10 generations? So the Gemara answers, Ki ahani Gzeira Shava me asiri ve'elach. We only need the Gzeira Shava from 10 and on. Why? Because the Torah told us explicitly that Gam dor asiri lo yavoy B'Kahal Hashem. By Mamzer, the Torah tells us that it's usher until after 10 generations. So we don't need a Gzeira Shava for there. The Gzeira Shava only starts after 10 to tell us that it's forever. So the Gemara asks, "V'hanan tanan mamzerin v'nesinin asurin the isurin isur olam." Our Mishnah says that a mamzer and a nasin is usur forever, both men and women. So how could what's Rish Lakish telling us over here that women after 10 generations are mutter? It says asur olam and zacharim and nekevais. Like Kasha, the Gemara answers, Hakamanda Amar Dun Mino Umino, Hakamanda Amar Dun Mino Vuki Basra. There's a machlaikis how Gzeira Shava works. In general, everywhere we have a Gzeira Shava. Does Gzeira Shava work with Dun Mino Umino, which means, in one place in the Torah there's information lacking, so we need to borrow it, we need to have a Gzeira Shava to get that information from another place, another similar place. Right? So we take that information, and that's dun mina. Do we continue and umina, and continue to take more information, more details of the source, of the new source, to bring over here where we needed to bring the information? So in our case it would be Mamzer is missing some information. It doesn't say ad olam. So we need a Gzeira Shava to tell me from Amun Umoyav, Amoni Umayavi, to tell us that it's forever and ever. So we have a Gzeira Shava to tell us, just like by Amun Umayav it's forever, by Mamzer it's also forever. That's the Gzeira Shava. So if you say Doin Mina Umina, we learn that detail, which we were missing, and we continue to learn from there. So Rish Lakish would say like that we continue to learn from there. Not only is Ad Olam learned from the Gzeira Shava, also women are mutter is learned from the Gzeira Shava. We continue to take more information from the source. But the other opinion of how Gzeira Shava works is we only take what we're missing. If we're missing a detail over here, we take it with a Gzeira Shava from another place in the Torah, but only that detail, and then we go back to the original place in the Torah and we apply its rules for the rest of the details. In other words, so how would it apply over here? Mamzer and Mamzeres, it's missing a piece of information. It doesn't say ad olam. So only that detail we would take with the Gzeira Shava from Amun Umayav and nothing else. We're not going to go ahead. And so our Mishnah, which says Asr for Zachar and Nekeva forever, our Mishnah understands that Gzeira Shava works with Doin Mina V'uki what's the words again? V'uki Ba'asra. Then you continue in its own place. Mamzer took that information from Amun Umayav, then you go back to Mamzer. You don't take any more details. But according to Rish Lakish takes that information plus more information. Continues to take information. So therefore he says that a woman after 10 generations is mutter loving B'Kahal Hashem. Shalu es Rabbi Eliezer, Mamzeres la'achar asara dori mahu. They asked Rabbi Eliezer, Mamzeres after 10 generations, what's her status? What's the halacha? Amar lahem, miyite li dar shlishi v'atarena. If you bring me a 3rd generation Mamzeres, I'll make her tahar. In other words, it doesn't exist. What we see from here, because Savar Mamzer loichayi, he holds, Rabbi Eliezer holds that a Mamzer doesn't live. Hashem didn't want a mamzer to continue, because then it'll mix into the Jewish nation and it'll be producing mamzerim all over and we won't even know about it. So since Hashem didn't want it to continue, a mamzer won't live. V'chein Rav Huna, and Rav Huna says also mamzer lo chaye. In fact, the Gemara v'ho'anan tanan mamzerin asurin v'isurin isur olam. So then, what's our Mishnah telling us that a mamzer is usher and usher forever? Why would our Mishnah tell us those words that it's usher forever if they don't exist, if they don't continue? So second, third, and fourth generation, etc. Rabbi Zera says, it was explained to me from Rabbi Yehuda, the idea chaye. If it's a known mamzer, everybody knows this person is a mamzer, then it lives. The loy idea, if it's not known that this is a mamzer, loy chaye, because then it'll, by mistake, not knowingly, people would marry, it would make its way, this mamzer will make its way back into the Kahal Hashem and keep producing more mamzerim.
Is it possible since it does not live, maybe they'll live to marry and won't be Jewish anymore?
I don't think that's a simple explanation.
Physically die.
Yeah. Or they'll just die without continuing. They won't have another generation.
You see, today there's a lot of mums there.
Okay.
Politicians, you know.
Okay. So Rabbi Zera is saying what he heard from Rabbi Yehuda, that if you know about him, he'll live. Because everybody will know not to marry. That this person, this mamzer or mamzeres can't marry in. The loy idea, if it's not known that this person is a mamzer, loy chai, won't live. The idea of a loy idea, if it's known but not known, so like it's known a little bit, at plus adari. It would live till 3 generations. So that's why Rabbi Lozer says if you bring me a 3rd generation mamzer, so this satisfies all the different opinions, whether it doesn't live at all or it lives till 3 generations or ad olam. It's different if it's known or not. How well known it is that this person is a mamzer. More than that, more than 3 generations, it won't live. There was one person that lived in the neighborhood of Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Ami announced that this person is a mamzer. So Bachi va'azal, he was crying, he was going and he was crying, he was very upset. Because now the secret got out. Everybody knows he's a mamzer. Amar le, Chaim nasati lach. What's your problem? I gave you life. Now that it's known, you could live. Right? Amar Avchana Bar Ada. So now we're going to get, the Gemara now is going to get in and carry over to the next DAF, is going to get into the source of these Nesinim. Who are these Nesinim, which are the Gevainim, and why couldn't they marry into the Jewish nation? Omar Rav Chana Bar Ada. Interesting story. Amar Rav Chana Bar Ada. Nesinim David Gazer Aleihem. David HaMelech made the Gzeira on them that they cannot marry into Klal Yisrael. Shenemar vayikra hamelech legavonim vayomer aleihem. It says in the pasuk, the king David, King David called to them, to the Gavonim vayomer, and he said to them, etc. The Hagavonim, and he said, Hagavonim loy b'nei Yisrael hema. The Gavonim are not part of b'nei Yisrael. Okay, we'll see, because they don't have the qualities of b'nei Yisrael. And like we said, they weren't really b'nei Yisrael to begin with. They deceitfully converted in the time of Yeshua, and they were avadim until now, and then David made this gzeira. My time ago, Aryai. Why did he make this gzeira? The chsev, it says in the pasuk, "Vayihi Rav," there was a hunger b'mei David. Shalosh shanim shana achar shana. 3 years, 1 year after the other. Shana rishana, in the first year, Amar Lahem. So David said, "Shema avodas kachavim yesh b'chem." Maybe the reason why we're having a famine is because there's idol worshippers amongst you. In the nation. Right? The pasuk says, if you'll serve other gods, there won't be rain, and therefore there's a famine. Maybe that's the reason. He checked it out and he didn't find. There was no idol worshippers. Shniya, in the 2nd year, where the famine continued, so David said to Klal Yisrael, he said, maybe there are people that are involved in forbidden relationships. Aveira. And what would the source for that be? Because the pasuk says, "Vayimanu revivim." The early rain is held back, umalkosh loyhaya, and the later rain there isn't. Umeitzach isha zayna hayalach, and the forehead of a harlot, of a woman who's a zayna, there is amongst you, or is to you. So basically, he's saying it's because you have zaynas amongst you, Klal Yisrael. That's why there's no rain. But he checked it out, and it wasn't so. Shlishis, in the 3rd year, Amar Lahem. I'm sorry?
You live after David?
Yes.
Yes.
Ruach HaKodesh, probably.
What? The pasuk was from Yirmiyahu, right?
He probably had Ruach HaKodesh.
You knew the pasuk?
Yeah.
Just based on the pasuk, yeah. Yeah.
Besides the structure of the temple.
Right.
There was no temple.
Okay. Right. Also, he said, okay, the third year, Amar Lahem, Shema Paiskate Staka Barabim Yesh Bachem, the A Noistin, and they're not giving. So basically, what maybe he's suggesting why there's still a famine is because people are pledging big donations, big money, and they're not paying. So they just want to look good, but they're not actually giving it. The Chesiv Nesiim Veruach, the Geshem Oy, and there won't be any rain. Ish Mishalo B'matas Sheker. A person glorifies himself Mishalo B'matas Sheker with giving falsely, like he doesn't give. But they checked it out and there wasn't. So what was going on? Why was there this famine? Omar, so David said to himself, Eina davar toloi ela bi. I have to figure this out. It's totally in me. I have to figure it out. Miyad vayvakish David es pnei Hashem. So immediately vayvakish David es pnei Hashem. In fact, the Gemara, Mahi, what does that mean? Vayvakish David es pnei Hashem. That he asked from Hashem, Pnei Hashem. Amar Shlakish sheshoab urmatumim. He asked the urmatumim. My mashma. How do we know that it's urmatumim? Because Omar Rabbi Elazar Asya Pnei Pnei. We have Xer Shava where it says Pnei Pnei. Ksiv Hacha Vayvakish David is Pnei Hashem. Ksiv Hazam, it says over there in another place Yesha'al Loi B'Mishpat Ha'urim L'Fnei Hashem. So you see that urmatumim uses the word Pnei. So Pnei Hashem is the urmatumim. So what did the urmatumim? What did Hashem answer David? Vayomer Hashem said, El Shol ve'el Beis Hadamim, to Shol and Beis Hadamim, house of blood literally, but Al Asher Heimis Es HaGevonim. So it's two things. El Shol, Shaloi Nisped Kahalacha. The problem why there was a famine is because when Shol died, he wasn't eulogized properly. Ve'el Beis Hadamim, Al Asher Heimis Es HaGevonim. Because Shol killed the Gevonim. Where do we find that Shaul killed the Gevonim? Shaul killed out Noiv, which was the city of Kohanim, and the Gevonim were Avadim. They were the ones who gathered the wood and the water for the Mizbeach, for the Kohanim. Therefore, since they were doing a service for the Mizbeach, the Kohanim supported them, gave them food and drink. So when he killed out the city of Kohanim who were supporting the Gevonim, he took away their lifeline. So therefore they died. So it's as if the pasuk considers it as if Shaul killed the Gevonim directly. So in fact the Gemara Kotava el Shaul shel nispek halacha and Kotava al asher heimis es Gevonim. So it seems like the problem over here, why there was this famine in the time of David, is because they didn't eulogize Shaul properly, and because Shaul did something wrong. It's like it seems funny that Shaul did something wrong and we did something wrong to Shaul. So the Gemara says, yes. The Amar Shlokish might say, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk, Bakshu es Hashem kol anvei eretz asher mishpatoi poalu. So the Gemara says, Ba asher mishpatoi sham poaloi. Where you look for judgment, you find the tzidkus also. Like sometimes when you look into a problem, you find good also. So yeah, it was a problem and something that Shaul Shaul was really roy to, because he should have been eulogized properly and he wasn't. And also because he did something wrong, he killed the Gevonim. Omar David. So David said, you can stop me whenever you want, but this Gemara continues. Omar David, Shaul Shaul nafkalahu Shaul nafkalahu Tracer Yarchishata. Shaul already passed 12 months, so you can't say a hesped on somebody after 12 months. That's what he said. So really Rashi says that it was really 30 years later, this story, after Shaul died, but he was just saying the halacha is that after 12 months you don't take a hesped. Nesinim, but about the Nesinim, the Gevonim that were killed, so let's go appease them. The people that are left from the Nesinim, let's go appease them. Nikrinu v'nefaisinu. So that's where it says, Vayikra hamelch leGevonim. The king called the Gevonim, Vayomer aleim, and he said to them, Mo'asalochem u'b'mei chaper. What should we do for you, and with what can we be atoned? Like, so that this hunger will be taken away. And the nation of Hashem will be blessed. So the Gevonim said, Ein lanu kesef v'zavim shol v'im beisa. We don't want any gold and silver from the house of Shol. Ve'ein lanu ish. We don't want anybody to die except from the children of Shol.